everyone, my name is Bailey Martin.
I am Cheyenne Slack.
Daniel Hammond.
Mackenzie Tay.
Margaret Arps.
And this is our podcast for our group project. Today we're going to discuss, analyze, and dissect the portrayal of teenage girls in womanhood in coming-of-age films, specifically those with female leads. We watched the film Lady Bird and two short films called Swimsuit and Delapo Was Fine. And to start, let's discuss Lady Bird. So Lady Bird was released in 2017, but it is set in 2002. The film follows Christine, who has renamed herself Lady Bird. She's a senior in high school, and throughout the film, we see Lady Bird struggle with her identity, college choices, parental issues, financial issues, and all other issues that arise during that troubling time of life. The main point of admiration I have for Lady Bird is her being able to boldly rename herself and stick to it, even though everybody is judging her for her choice.
Yeah, speaking of judging, I think a large point to make is the beauty standards that she suffered through and that we all suffer through in a when we're growing up, basically, and in this coming of age film. For example, the main character, who renamed herself Lady Bird, she was like later on in the movie when she was trying to, growing up a bit and realizing what is seen as desirable to many. Her friend offered her a sandwich for lunch, and she was like, "Oh, no, thank you. Actually, I'm trying to lose weight right now." So she planned on not eating her lunch to lose weight, and she's supposed to be like a 17-year-old girl. And I just find it tragic, because it really does. Representation in media for women is so important to see bodies like theirs, to see skin like theirs, to see souls like theirs. And clearly so many young girls have this issue. Like my sister, for example, she's 16 years old, and when she was 14 she came to me like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna try to lose a little bit of weight." And I was like, "You still have your baby fat." Like that doesn't even make sense to me. But it's just the society that we live in, and I think this was such an accurate portrayal.
Yeah, definitely. And the baby fat point you made, so many young girls don't realize that our bodies are still changing. And you think when we hit puberty, like that's just it, but really there's so many more changes. I mean, hormonally, physically, that we're gonna go through. But that goes back to kind of the adultification article that we read in this class.
Yes,
we see so many teenage dramas, coming of age films, where the girls are so young, early in high school, and they're already objectifying themselves, sexualizing themselves. So then that comes out for normal people, like if Lady Bird wasn't a character in a film, obviously she would still be facing these beauty standard issues, even though, like you said, she's 17 and still probably still has baby fat. Another thing I really liked about the film was the love interest that she had. And it didn't change her personality, or her character wasn't set around the love interest that she had. Once it was over, and she was back to making her college plans and worrying about herself, rather than in shows like Euphoria, when there's a love interest in it, it's an uproar. Your whole life changes around it. I really liked how Christine was able to have that love interest, and they didn't make it her whole personality trait. I really like that.
Like going off the love interest idea is like Timothy Chalamet's character, right? Kind of shows like the fact
Kyle.
Kyle. The idea that like not all love interests are like perfect, and even with like her previous one with like the idea of him being like a gay character, but like Timothy Chalamet's character specifically is just like that like stereotypical like cool guy that just ends up being an asshole.
The next point of interest that I wanted to speak about Lady Bird was the financial issues we see them go through, and I think Daniel made a really good observation about the financial issues, and I'll let him speak on that.
Yeah, sure. So I thought it was just interesting that the mother in this film was the breadwinner for sure. The dad kind of lost his job, so seeing the mom kind of take over that role was kind of atypical when you consider it in comparison to like traditional media, I think. Yeah,
definitely, and I think it goes back to what we learned about motherhood. You can see that Lady Bird holds some sort of resentment, even though she doesn't verbally say, "I'm angry at you because you work so much." You can tell there's some sort of resentment there because she's not at home as much. And that goes back to us learning, working mothers are always dubbed as less than, worse than other mothers. And it's just not right. Because Lady Bird, she's struggling with not having enough money to buy cute clothes and apply to colleges, but in the same breath, she doesn't want her mom to work as much. And it's like, where do you want the money from then, you know?
Right, and like she has this really great relationship with her dad, who is very present, but currently doesn't have a job. And you know, in the entire film, we have this like good cop, bad cop portrayal of the mother and the father.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's interesting that if you compare it to typically how men are presented in media, like fathers, we see that if they work all the time and they're the breadwinner for the family and they're not present and they don't know everything that's going on in their kid's life, for example, not always there at every game, and isn't there emotionally and for the child in a supportive way, it isn't that big of a deal. And I feel like mothers specifically are targeted in a very negative way when they are in the same position as the father.
Yeah, held to a higher standard, even at the same position, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I had not thought about in the context of this film until you brought it up. So I hadn't thought about it, but it makes so much sense, and it is very realistic. And I think that's the major theme that we see in Lady Bird, is everything is very realistic when it comes to Lady Bird herself and what she's going through, her love interest, the financial issues, and most importantly, I think the mother and daughter relationship, because I don't know any of my teenage friends that were friends with their mother at that point. So it's really unrealistic when you watch a show and they're like best friends and confide in each other, even though that's how it should be. That's not how it is, so it's not realistic. And I really like how they showed not only the good but the bad side of their relationship. And the next film we watched, the short film Swimsuit, it was released in 2021, and it showed a really good aspect of motherhood, mother-daughter relationships as well. So Swimsuit was about about 8 to 10-year-old girl, and she has a swim meet coming up, and her and her mother practice Islam, and she wants her to wear a burkini for the meet rather than like a traditional one piece she would wear to a swim meet. And the main character struggles with that and doesn't want to, and that's kind of the basis of the film. And so anyways, there comes a point when her mother finds out that she's not wearing this burkini, and rather than her mother calling her out right there and making a scene or causing a fight, she notices that her daughter is feeling very down for not winning the swim meet to begin with. So instead of confronting her with that issue, she deals with the most important issue, I believe, which is her daughter feeling hurt and confiding in her.
Yeah, and we see like it's almost like the complete opposite of the way that the relationship is between in Lady Bird, between her mother and Lady Bird herself. You see that her mom doesn't give her a lot of grace, which is something that you had said, which is very true, that she holds her to a really high standard, and you know, when they're together they're always bickering because they're always like picking at each other. And if she were to do something wrong or to fail, she doesn't give her that grace that she needs. And I feel like this points to an important subject to me, which is like the different way that the mothers treated the situation might have to do with their cultural differences as well. Because I feel like what I got from the first mother was that she was letting her ego get in the way a lot of the time. The mother from Lady Bird. And she really had trouble with the changes of her daughter, different opinions. You know, she let her ego get in the way all the time. But what I see in Swimsuit is that the mother really doesn't seem to have ego as an issue. It's about tradition with her daughter, and it's about their connection to religion rather than anything else. And when her daughter doesn't follow that, which is actually a really big deal, like in public, you know, having her hair out and all this skin out, it's a really big deal. But she does not let her ego get in the way and her anger get in the way, and she sees her daughter for who she is. And I think it just points to, the different kind of challenges that you face as like a brown girl from a Middle Eastern country who practices Islam, compared to, you know, a young white girl
In Sacramento.
in Sacramento.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that the standards, I really like that you pointed out the standards are based on religion with Swimsuit, whereas the first one, it's more egotistical, of course, and I think it's a lot of it goes back to the financial issues. Like, she doesn't want Lady Bird to outwardly show that they're having financial issues, and so by her acting rebellious and doing all these what she sees as like lower class activities and things, I think that's why her mother gets so angry, because she doesn't want her to portray what's going on at home into the outer world.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that, like, when you were talking about motherhood and Swimsuit that I, like, pointed out was, like, how compassionate and caring the mom was with, like, how at the beginning of the film she had, like, that necklace that she was, like, prayed over it 20 times. It will help you with your, like, swim meet, and, like, how you could always see her, like, helping her with her clothes and her scarf and everything. So that was something that, like, I really noticed about the mom, was how, like, kind she was, even though she is, like, opposed to her daughter.
Yeah.
I think she had an open mind when it came to letting her daughter, because, you know, a lot of times parents, older generations specifically, aren't in tune with their emotions, and so when it comes to trying to help their kids deal with them, they don't know how to. And so that's why I appreciate it when the mother didn't explode on her daughter for not wearing the swimsuit.
Yeah.
And she was just like, okay, I'm gonna let this sit and like comfort her, because she's also obviously in pain about not doing well in her race.
Yeah.
Right, and this is another, we have to think about, this is another hardworking mother represented, but represented in a different light, actually, because she has to work all the time, and that is why she couldn't originally go to her daughter's swim meet, and her daughter was like, oh, I'm gonna wear the regular swimsuit, and she'll never find out, but she ended up going because she got off early or whatever. But regardless, her daughter, you can tell the entire film that she does not hold it against her that she works all the time. She sees her possibly as like a strong, hardworking woman to look up to. When on the other end with Lady Bird, it seemed like a depiction that was closer to at least like my reality with how I would feel if my mother was working all the time. But also at the same time, it showed a different light, which is really important for hardworking mothers, which is that you're not always, you know, failing your children or not there for them or not emotionally capable of being there.
Yeah, because even though she wasn't originally going to be there, at the end, she was there when it was most important.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I think that was what mattered most, was her just being there to comfort her.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking on the burkini, recently in France, they've actually banned it through a law. And aside from it making a burkini illegal, I think it has a lot of social implications. It opens the door for more people having stereotypes surrounding Middle Eastern cultures, and I think that follows up to the main character in Swimsuit not wanting to wear the burkini. I don't think it was so much as her not wanting to follow and practice her mother's religion as it was she just wanted to avoid the stares and getting bullied.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't her rebelling against the religion, it was her protecting herself. And not only is it hard to buy a swimsuit at this point in time, I mean, it is even still today as a woman, it's hard to buy a swimsuit no matter what age you are. But I couldn't imagine going to buy a swimsuit at that age, being so young, and then not only having to think about what my body looks like in it and worrying about those things, but also being bullied because it wasn't the perfect swimsuit.
Yeah, and also because as we see in Lady Bird and the next thing we're going to be talking about, Delapo is Fine, all of these girls are surrounded by white women.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is very apparent. And so she's the main character in Swimsuit, she is surrounded by white girls who have their own implicit bias that they don't understand. They're little girls, so they're not trying to actively be hateful, I'm sure, but they pick on her and see that she's different. And I know that you had brought up like one scene where they were specifically rude.
Oh yeah, like there's a scene where she puts on the burkini and they're like asking her why is she taking so long in there? Like why she's so weird, and she's just like standing there in her bikini feeling so like self-conscious.
Yeah, and like you said, I don't think it was intentional trying to be hateful. It was more this person's different. Yeah, and I think it was, if she was different in any other aspect, they would still target her that way. But it's such an intimate issue, a swimsuit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're already feeling so exposed, even if you are wearing a bikini, compared to wearing jeans and a t-shirt, it's a lot different. So you're already feeling so vulnerable, and then to also have your classmates, teammates kind of pick on you for that vulnerability. I bet it was painful, and you could tell that it was painful to her, even though she didn't verbally express it. It was all in the face.
Yeah, all little girls want to fit in.
Right,
No matter
and
what.
like you said, she is surrounded by white women, and it's apparent. But there is, at no point is it mentioned. I think the filmmakers did a really good job at just like, if you pay attention to the background, you can see that she is the only POC in the film, and that's something I think they did really well with Delapo is Fine as well. Delapo is Fine was released in 2021, and it follows an African girl who is at a boarding school in the UK, and she's struggling with her identity, and she's about to get a new job, and she gets a mentor, and she is the only other black woman in the film. So again, it's not said in the film that those two are the only black women around, but it's apparent through the background essentially. And through the microaggressions and everything that you see, you can tell that they are the only POC in that film, and that was a point of interest. Yeah, Delapo is Fine I really liked, especially going back to the mentor. You would expect that she would be comforting to Delapo and encourage her to be her true self, but instead we're met with a mentor that has internalized so much racism and sexism, and instead of encouraging Delapo to be herself, like I said, she encourages her to assimilate to everybody around her, which is all white women, and she does it in a very harmful and rude way. And I think that she had good intentions. I just think that
They were outdated.
Yes, outdated intentions. Yes.
Do we
and
want to talk
standards.
about like specifically what happened in the film?
Yeah, so basically Delapo came to a meeting that she was having with her supervisor or the mentor, and her appearance, she had an afro in her uniform, and the woman criticized her for the way she introduced herself. She was like, you need to change your name, something simpler like Dolly. And then she also told
Change
her
the name, assimilation.
Yeah, she also told her that your hair was unprofessional, you need to buy a wig or you need to straighten it. And so going into this, I'm pretty sure Delapo thought, okay, I'm going to get good advice, like helpful things, not be discouraged for my appearance and how I want people to call me. So I think that was very, I could say, traumatizing for her, because she's a young girl around all these white people. She already stands out. And so now you have the only person who looks like you, and they're kicking you off your pedestal. And I don't think that was very comfortable for her.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and it points to something that the Black community continues to struggle with, which is double consciousness, which is a term coined by W.B. Du Bois, where it talks about the reality of knowing who you are, knowing your culture, you're a Black person, loving yourself, whatever else, and then the depiction and what everyone else believes of you. And so, Black people typically in media are depicted a certain way. We all know this. And people around them typically, maybe think less of them or expect them to assimilate and change and whatever else. And so you can tell that this counselor who is older than Delapo and has spent more time in the white community is struggling with this idea. And I don't think necessarily a lot of it is necessarily internalized racism. I think some of it is wanting to protect Delapo, because she probably maybe was different when she was younger and stood out of the crowd and aggressively learned that doesn't help her in her career and her life.
I like how you said protect her, because honestly, if you think about it, you would think that the woman would notice the different changes in generational help. So how she was being treated when she was probably Delapo's age is definitely different, because at the end of the movie, you can tell when Delapo goes into her interview and she has her natural hair, the white woman came and was like, how do you want me to pronounce your name? And you look very good today. And actually encouraging her, while the Black woman stood there and was basically in disbelief.
Yeah.
And so I think like that could have been a pivotal moment for her to be like, okay, maybe I need to worry about myself and like not discourage other Black girls that are coming up in the industry.
Do you think this is like accurate to life? Have you met like people of color older than you that have suggested you wear your hair a certain way, act a certain way?
Yeah, for sure. I also was talking to my mom this morning about it, and because I was explaining to her the Delapo movie, and she was like, yeah, I remember one time I had an interview and she has locks like me, and so she was afraid of how the white woman interviewing her would portray her locks. So she says she slicked it back as slick as she could to hide her locks. And I was like,
wow.
I'm sorry you had to go through that, but
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen to me.
Yeah. Our generation definitely, I feel like, shies away from trying to fit a mold.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something, it points to the generational differences for sure, and like the attachment to just beliefs and old ways of thinking and ideologies that are present in all of these films, actually.
Yeah, I really like that you touched on when she said, when your mom said that she had to cover her hair for an interview just because she felt that she would be targeted for it. And even though obviously it wasn't in the description, she just knew from her life experience that was what was going to happen. And there's a point in the movie when one of Delapo's friends, she is a white girl with very curly, tight curled hair, and Delapo is contemplating getting a wig, and her friend responds with, well, your hair is just curly like mine, like,
You don't see me trying to hide my curls or something.
yeah, I've never had to cover my hair for an interview. And even though her friend was trying to encourage her in a way, because of her ignorance, it was a microaggression. And it's just so funny how different it can be, and how she didn't really think about it in that context. Whereas she was just like, this is my friend and we both have curly hair, like, why are you targeting yourself, essentially? But she doesn't understand the cultural context around
The pressures around being black.
Yeah.
You know, those women couldn't understand it, especially you could tell that, you know, not only in the school, but in their surroundings. Clearly they are surrounded by white people typically with the things that she would say. Because she also like made a comment like saying, well, if they made me change my hair, I would just not work there or something.
Right.
I would not even try. And then the Labo was like, well, I don't have that option.
Yeah.
So like, it's definitely just kind of, I don't think it was direct, like angry, racist, like violence in any way. I just believe that this is a bias that is undiscovered and ignorance.
Yeah, a lot of people are ignorant to it because they just don't pay the attention to it. Yeah. And higher standards for people of color is shown really well through this film, I believe, too. It goes back to the microaggressions and just straight up aggression, honestly, from the mentor. She, like we touched on, she is holding Delapo to such a higher standard than somebody else she would mentor that was a white woman. She would, you know, be like, get your materials ready, get your interview ready, da-da-da-da. But Delapo is not only focused on getting this job and doing well in the interview, but changing her whole self to get this job and to prepare for the interview. Whereas I think we know if it was a white girl, that wouldn't have been the case. Even if she did have big, kinky curled hair, you know, she still wouldn't have been like, you know, straighten her hair.
To touch on the high standard is like that point where they were talking about Delapo's hair, and the black woman was like, but do your friends think your hair is cool? Because Delapo was like, well, my friends like my hair. And then she was like, so they think it's cool? And Delapo was like, yeah. And she was like, and that's exactly why you need to change it. Because it's cool. It's art for them, but it's a struggle for us. So you need to change it so they don't view you as somebody
a spectacle.
Yeah, a spectacle. That's important to say.
Yeah, no, and that's I think that Swimsuit also kind of shows that the higher standards for people of color, but it wasn't as much external. It was more internal from her mother, and I don't think it was so much, like we said, it was all based around religion, essentially. I don't think it was, the standards were held from any other context than their religion, whereas Delapo is getting it from everywhere around her. I mean, even video chatting her parents back at home, they're like, oh, we love the wig, you know,
Looks
like
better.
Yeah, it looks better. And it was just sad. It was very sad. And I think the issue of motherhood, a topic of motherhood, carried really well in all of these films too. Even though Delapo is not near her family, like we mentioned previously, they video chatted and it showed her mother supporting her wearing a wig and changing herself.
And I would say that the counselor is a mother figure for her as well. So there definitely is motherhood all throughout these films.
Yeah.
There's you also see attached to motherhood their own attachment to ideologies and their values that they've held on to for so long. And that is the reason that they combat, or the reason for the existence of these films at all, is these young women's struggle growing up and in a new world, a growing, changing world with parents that have views and ideologies and whatever opinions that they're inflicting like upon them, and it's like struggling against the grain, really.
Yeah, and definitely the past fighting the future,
Mm-hmm.
and that internalized struggle. And I think through this film they show it externally really well.
Realistically, yeah.
Yes, internal struggles. And I really liked how in Lady Bird we get a working mother who is struggling with like so many external issues, not just working constantly, but grieving the future loss of her daughter, going to school, the loss of her husband's job, the loss of finances, and then in Swimsuit we see a mother that's also working but is more comforting.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Jalapa is Fine we barely see a snippet of her mother, but when we do see it, it's supportive, but it's not supportive in the way it should have been. And on the same topic, I like how each film had older women above the age of 35, 40 cast, because we don't see a lot of that, of course.
Yeah, and if we do see it, we see the same things. And I thought that it was very nice, like for example in Lady Bird, that the mother talked about her mother being an abusive alcoholic, and you seeing how the trauma lived generation upon generation.
Yeah, carried down.
So representations of like trauma, generational trauma, that's important. With the Burkini swimsuit, you see representations of a present, loving, hardworking Muslim mother. That's important. In Jalapa is Fine, you see representations of, of course, the counselor being in a higher position, and you don't typically, I feel like, see Black women in higher positions.
Yeah.
And then you see representations of, she's a dreamer. Jalapa is a dreamer, because I'm guessing, well, she's not in America, but it's like the same idea,
Yeah.
Her parents are from Africa, and she's living in another country, and she's starting a new generation of that family in another place. So we see all kinds of representations that are really important.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think the most common topic between all three was beauty standards and body issues, because each girl goes through an issue with her body image and how she loves herself and how she represents herself to the world around her. And I think that that's a big difference between female coming of age films and male coming of age films, because you don't see as much as that internal hatred of your own body when it comes to a male. And I think that they really showed that struggle well throughout every film. Because even when it was small things, you could still, if you're a woman and you've experienced these things, the small reactions, like not eating the sandwich or closing a magazine because you saw something that made you not like yourself, you can relate to that. Even when it's not verbally said and you can see their reaction, you relate to that heavily if you've been through that. And then back to the representation in all these films, we went back to our See Jane document that was given to us in class, and found some interesting statistics that really applied well to our project. So in the box office of films, the prominence of race, 73% are usually white leads. 73% of the films had white leads, and then 17% had leads of color, and then 10% of these films also had a white person that was being a co-lead. And I think that our films fit really well into these statistics and showed a different side of it. Lady Bird, of course, is obviously fitting into that 73%, and it doesn't even really go past that. And then Swimsuit, it fits into that 17% of leads of color, which I think is awesome. And like you said, we don't see representation of Muslim women much in film, especially at this age. Like I've never seen a coming of age film.
Brown coming of age films.
Yeah. And then for Jalapa is Fine, it fits into two different categories in this. So it fits into that 17% of leads of color, but it also fits into the 10% of a white person being the supporting actor.
Yeah.
Which I loved, because it's always, they're always the main topic, and we're seeing different representations, and also just seeing how the relationship between Jalapa and her white friend how they love each other so much, but there's still so many cultural differences, and how even though Delapo's friend tries so hard, she's not always as sensitive to these differences as she should be.
Absolutely.
But of course, she's a young girl, and I think when she gets into the world, she'll see more of that, hopefully. But yeah, no, it was just so interesting to see these different representations of people. I would have never understood the struggle of buying a bikini. I would have never understood the struggle of, you know, being targeted.
Forced to assimilate.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, I mean, you hear about it, but seeing it visually and in such a realistic term, it's very eye opening.
Yeah, and I think Lady Bird was just a great coming of age film altogether because of all the ideas that we talked about and the realisticness of the bickering, the fighting with the family, the realisticness of financial struggles in a family. It was all together. These films really created a cohesive project to really analyze how mothers and young girls are represented in media as they grow through time.
Yeah, and womanhood and teenagehood. I just really liked how the aspect of teenagehood in these films wasn't so sexual, because in coming of age films and teen dramas on TV, it is all about sex, which of course at this time you are finding your sexuality, you are exploring that, but your whole character is not based on this sexuality and finding all these things out. So I just loved how each of them that wasn't the main point of the plot. So yeah, no, I feel like I've learned a lot from this project. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, no, like you said, I think it was very cohesive, all the things that we picked out, and I will be recommending these to anybody that will listen to me, essentially. So, well, thank you guys so much for listening to our podcast today. We hope that you learned something, and we can't wait to listen to your guys's. Thank you.